The arrival at Rose Cottage. The letter arrived on a grey morning, its tone as restrained as the life it sought to disturb. Clara Hastings read it twice before setting it down, her fingers lingering against the edge of the paper, as though reluctant to accept its contents fully. Miss Agnes Whitcomb is deceased. As her nearest living relative, you are requested to attend to the arrangements regarding her estate. Clara frowned slightly. Nearest living relative, she murmured. That seems rather unlikely. Her connection to Agnes Whitcomb was distant at best. Her mother had once mentioned a cousin, long estranged, who had chosen to withdraw from family affairs entirely. There had been no visits, no correspondence, no acknowledgement of shared blood for as long as Clara could remember, and yet, here she was, summoned. The journey to Witchwood Hollow took most of the afternoon, the countryside unfolding in quiet, unremarkable beauty. Clara watched it pass from the carriage window, her thoughts turning repeatedly to the letter. There was something peculiar about it. Not the death itself, that was after all inevitable, but the manner in which it had been conveyed. Brief, formal, almost detached, as though the writer had wished to avoid saying too much. Clara had always believed that such restraint often concealed more than it revealed. Witchwood Hollow appeared just as the light began to fade. It was a small village, the sort where every detail seemed carefully preserved. The houses stood in neat rows, their gardens orderly, their windows reflecting the soft glow of evening lamps. It should have felt welcoming. Instead, Clara sensed something else. Not hostility, but watchfulness. As her carriage passed through the main street, she noticed the way conversations faltered, the way glances lingered just a fraction too long. They know, she thought. They already know who I am. Rose Cottage stood at the far end of the lane, slightly apart from the rest of the village. It was smaller than Clara had imagined, though no less charming. Climbing roses framed the doorway, their pale blooms catching the last of the light. The windows were shuttered, but not neglected. The house had been cared for, even in death. A man stood waiting by the gate. He removed his hat as Clara approached, his expression polite but reserved. "Miss Hastings?" he asked. "Yes. My name is Mr. Oliver Grant. I've been assisting with matters here." Clara inclined her head. "Thank you. I'm afraid this has all come rather suddenly." "Yes," he said. "It has." There was a pause. Miss Whitcomb's passing was unexpected. Mr. Grant hesitated. "Not entirely," he said at last, "though perhaps sooner than anticipated." Clara studied him briefly. There was something in his tone, carefully measured, slightly guarded. She filed the observation away. The door to Rose Cottage opened with a soft, almost reluctant creak. Inside, the air was still, not stale, but undisturbed. Everything was in its place. Furniture arranged with precision, surfaces spotless, curtains drawn just so. It was the sort of order that suggested habit rather than effort. Miss Whitcomb, Clara thought, had been a woman of discipline. She kept to herself, Mr. Grant said, as though reading her thoughts. Very particular about her routines. "I see," Clara replied. She rarely had visitors, and yet, Clara said, she maintained the house beautifully. "Yes," he agreed, "that she did." They moved slowly through the rooms. Each one revealed the same careful attention to detail, and the same absence of personal warmth. There were no photographs on the walls, no letters left carelessly on tables, no signs of a life lived beyond the immediate and the necessary. It was, Clara thought, a house without a story, which she knew was never truly the case. "And her belongings?" Clara asked. "In the study," Mr. Grant said, "though there is a complication." Clara raised an eyebrow. "What sort of complication?" He hesitated. "There is a room," he said, "that remains locked." Clara stopped walking. "Locked?" "Yes. And the key?" "Not found." She considered this. "That is unusual." "Yes," he said quietly. "It is." They reached the study. Unlike the rest of the house, this room bore signs of disturbance, not disorder exactly, but interruption. Papers had been gathered, then left incomplete. A drawer stood slightly ajar. Clara moved toward the desk. "There should be correspondence," she said. "Documents, personal effects." "Yes," Mr. Grant replied. "There should be. But there aren't." "No." Clara turned to him. You searched thoroughly, as I was able, and found nothing of significance. Clara's gaze moved slowly around the room. A life so carefully maintained did not simply disappear. Something was missing, something important. And the locked room? She asked. At the end of the hallway. May I see it? Mr. Grant hesitated, then nodded. The hallway seemed narrower now, though that was likely only her imagination. They stopped before a plain wooden door. It was unremarkable in every way, except for the lock, old, sturdy, and firmly secured. Clara reached out, touching the handle lightly. It did not move. She never allowed anyone inside, Mr. Grant said. Not even you? No. Clara withdrew her hand. Did she ever speak of it? Never. Clara stood very still. There is always a reason, she thought. Always. Behind her, the house remained silent. Too silent. Tell me, she said after a moment. How did she die? Mr. Grant shifted slightly. In her bed, he said. Peacefully, as far as we can tell. And who found her? I did. Clara turned to face him. And you are quite certain, she said, that there was nothing unusual? He met her gaze. For a moment something flickered there. Then it was gone. No, he said. Clara nodded slowly. Of course, she said. But as she turned back toward the locked door, her fingers brushing lightly against the cool wood, she knew there was something here, something hidden, something that had been kept, carefully, deliberately, out of sight. And whatever it was, it had not died with Agnes Whitcomb. Outside, the evening deepened. The village of Witchwood Hollow settled into quiet, as it always did. But within Rose Cottage, the past waited, unseen, unspoken, and very much alive. The village that would not speak. Clara slept poorly. It was not the unfamiliar bed, nor the silence of the countryside, both of which she had experienced often enough without discomfort. Rather, it was the quality of the silence inside Rose Cottage. It seemed too complete, too carefully held, as though the house itself resisted disturbance. Several times during the night she woke with the curious impression that she had forgotten something important. Each time, her thoughts returned to the same thing, the locked door. Morning brought a pale, diffused light that filtered through the curtains, softening the edges of the room but doing nothing to ease Clara's unease. She rose early. There was work to be done. Mr. Oliver Grant arrived promptly at 9:30, as though governed by the same quiet precision that had defined Miss Whitcomb's life. I trust you rested well, he asked politely. Not particularly, Clara replied, equally polite. But that is hardly unusual under the circumstances, he inclined his head. Yes. Breakfast was taken in near silence, broken only by the occasional practical remark, and Clara found herself watching him more closely than she intended. He was composed, careful, and, she thought, slightly too prepared. You knew my aunt well? She asked suddenly. Mr. Grant set down his cup. As well as anyone here did, he said. And what does that mean exactly? He hesitated. It means, he said, that Miss Whitcomb was not a woman who encouraged familiarity. Clara smiled faintly. That is a polite way of saying she kept people at a distance. Yes, he said simply. And yet, Clara continued, you were the one who found her. Yes. How did that come about? For the first time, Mr. Grant seemed less certain of his footing. I called upon her regularly, he said, to assist with certain matters, shopping, correspondence, small errands, and she allowed that. Reluctantly, he admitted. Clara leaned back slightly. That suggests a degree of trust. Yes, he said. She watched him for a moment longer. And yet, she said, she never mentioned me. No. The answer came too quickly. Clara did not press further. Not yet. I think, she said after a moment, that I should like to see the village. Mr. Grant looked faintly surprised. The village? Yes. If I am to understand anything about this place or about my aunt, I suspect I must begin there. He hesitated, then nodded. Very well. Witchwood Hollow appeared different in daylight, less shadowed, more ordinary. And yet the sense of quiet observation remained. They walked along the narrow lane, past carefully tended gardens and modest cottages. Clara noted the subtle shifts in behaviour as they passed. Conversations paused, eyes followed, and though greetings were offered, they carried a certain restraint. "They are curious," Mr. Grant said quietly. "Yes," Clara replied. "But not merely curious." He glanced at her. "No? No," she said. "They are cautious." Their first stop was the village post office, a small, tidy building that seemed to serve as both practical necessity and social hub. Inside, a woman behind the counter looked up as they entered. Her expression changed almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Grant," she said. "Good morning." "Mrs. Delaney," he replied. "This is Miss Hastings." Mrs. Delaney's gaze lingered on Clara. "Ah," she said. "The niece." "Distant niece," Clara corrected gently. "Yes," Mrs. Delaney said. "Of course." There was a pause. Clara smiled. "I understand my aunt lived here for many years." "Yes," Mrs. Delaney said. "And was well known?" Another pause. "Well enough," she said. Clara leaned slightly on the counter. "I imagine a woman living so quietly would not attract much attention." "No," Mrs. Delaney said quickly. "No, she kept to herself." The response was too quick, too definite. "And yet," Clara said lightly, "people seem aware of her." Mrs. Delaney's expression tightened just a fraction. "Well," she said, "one notices such things in a small place." Clara nodded. "Yes," she said, "I suppose one does." They left shortly afterward. Outside, Clara turned to Mr. Grant. "She knows something," she said. He did not deny it. "Most people here do," he replied. "Then why does no one say anything?" Mr. Grant's expression was carefully neutral. "Because," he said, "there is nothing to say." Clara stopped walking. "That is not true." He met her gaze. "No," he said quietly, "it is not." They continued on in silence. Their next stop was a small tea room near the edge of the village. It was modest but inviting, with lace curtains and neatly arranged tables. Inside, a few patrons sat quietly, their conversation subdued. As Clara entered, she felt the shift again. The same watchfulness, the same restraint. They took a table near the window. "I suppose," Clara said, "that asking direct questions will be of little use." "No," Mr. Grant said, "it will not." "Then what would you suggest?" He hesitated. "Time," he said, "and patience." Clara smiled faintly. "I am not known for either." A voice nearby spoke softly. "Perhaps you might try a different approach." Clara turned. At a small table near the fire sat an elderly lady, her knitting resting neatly in her lap. Her expression was mild, her eyes observant in a way that suggested nothing escaped her notice. "I beg your pardon?" Clara said. The lady smiled gently. "In villages," she said, "people rarely respond well to questions. They prefer conversation." Clara regarded her with interest. "And you would be?" she asked. "Miss Marple," the lady replied. Mr. Grant stiffened almost imperceptibly. Clara inclined her head. "Miss Marple," she said. "A pleasure." Miss Marple smiled. "Yes," she said. "I believe it may be." There was something about her, something calm yet quietly perceptive. Clara felt quite suddenly that she was in the presence of someone who understood far more than she chose to say. "You are staying at Rose Cottage, I believe?" Miss Marple said. "Yes," Clara replied. "And finding it interesting?" Clara hesitated. "Yes," she said. Miss Marple nodded. "Yes," she said. "It has that effect." Mr. Grant shifted slightly. "We were just leaving," he said. Miss Marple did not look at him. "Of course," she said mildly. Clara stood, but her attention remained on Miss Marple. "Perhaps," she said, "we might speak again." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "I have no doubt," she said, "that we shall." Outside, Clara turned to Mr. Grant. "You know her," she said. "Yes," he replied. "And?" He hesitated. "She has a way," he said, "of noticing things." Clara smiled. "Good," she said. "So do I." But as they walked back toward Rose Cottage, her thoughts remained with Miss Marple, and for the first time since her arrival, Clara felt something shift, because now she was no longer alone in asking questions. And somewhere, beneath the quiet surface of Witchwood Hollow, the truth had begun to stir. A house that remembers, Clara returned to Rose Cottage with a sense that something subtle had shifted, Not in the house itself, which remained as composed and orderly as ever, but in her understanding of it. It was no longer merely a place to be examined. It was a place that had been deliberately arranged, and that, she thought, was far more interesting. Mr. Oliver Grant excused himself shortly after their return, citing errands that required his attention. Clara did not attempt to detain him. In truth, she preferred the solitude. There are moments, she reflected, when one must be entirely alone to see things clearly. The house was quiet, not oppressively so, as it had seemed the night before, but quietly observant, as though waiting to see what she would do next. Clara removed her gloves and set them carefully on the small table by the door. "Very well," she murmured. "Let us begin properly." She started with the study. If anything of significance remained, it would be here. The desk stood precisely as she had left it, the slightly open drawer still revealing its incomplete contents. Clara approached it slowly, as though expecting it to yield something more upon a second inspection. It did not. At least, not immediately. She began with the obvious. Papers were neatly stacked, though most were of a mundane nature: household accounts, receipts, carefully itemized expenses. Miss Whitcomb had kept her affairs in impeccable order. Too impeccable, Clara thought. A life reduced entirely to its practicalities often concealed something far less orderly beneath. She opened the drawer fully this time. Inside there was very little: a pen, a folded handkerchief, and a small, odd leather-bound notebook. Clara paused. This had not been there before, she was certain of it. She picked it up slowly. The leather was worn but not neglected. It bore the faint marks of frequent handling. "Curious," she murmured. The notebook was not locked. That in itself felt unusual. She opened it. The pages were filled, not with continuous writing, but with brief, careful entries, dates, single lines, occasional names. Clara turned the pages slowly, her brow furrowing. There was no narrative, no explanation, only fragments. June 12th, post received, unusual. July 3rd, must remain careful. August 21st, saw him again. Clara stopped, saw him again. She read the line twice. There was no indication of who he might be, no elaboration, only the quiet weight of the words themselves. Clara turned another page. On September 9th, "It cannot remain hidden forever." A faint chill passed through her. The entries continued in the same manner, brief, restrained, but increasingly suggestive of something unresolved. And then they stopped. The final page contained only a single line. October 14th. She must never know. Clara closed the notebook slowly. Her thoughts moved quickly now, assembling possibilities. Post received. Unusual. Saw him again. It cannot remain hidden. She must never know. A pattern, perhaps, or the outline of one. Clara set the notebook down carefully. There was more here. There had to be. Her gaze moved slowly around the study. If Miss Whitcomb had recorded these thoughts, however briefly, then something or someone had troubled her. And yet, there were no letters, no correspondence, or no evidence of contact with the outside world beyond the most ordinary, which meant it had been removed. Clara's eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes," she said quietly. "That seems likely." She stood, moving toward the window. Outside, the garden lay still, its careful arrangement unchanged. Roses climbed the trellis with quiet determination, their pale blooms deceptively gentle. Everything about the cottage suggested order, control, deliberate maintenance, and yet a locked room, a missing key, a notebook filled with fragments. Clara turned back toward the hallway. The door stood exactly as before, closed, unyielding. She approached it slowly. There is always a reason, she thought again. Always. This time she examined the lock more closely. It was old, certainly, but not neglected. The metal bore signs of recent use, faint but unmistakable. Someone had opened this door, not long ago. Clara straightened. "That is interesting," she murmured. If the key had not been found among Miss Whitcomb's belongings, then someone else must have had access, and that someone had not come forward. Clara turned away from the door, her thoughts sharpening. Mr. Grant. He had been the one to find Miss Whitcomb, the one to assist with her affairs, the one who had searched the house. And found nothing, Clara said softly. She returned to the study, picking up the notebook once more. Saw him again. Who? And why had it mattered enough to record? A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Clara looked up. Yes? The door opened slowly. A young maid stood there, her expression uncertain. I beg your pardon, miss, she said. There is a visitor. Clara raised an eyebrow. A visitor? Yes. Miss! Clara hesitated only briefly. Very well, she said. Show them in. A few moments later, the familiar figure of Miss Marple entered the room. She paused just inside the doorway, her gaze moving quietly over the surroundings. Yes, she said softly, quite as I expected. Clara smiled faintly. You expected something in particular? Miss Marple returned the smile. Oh, yes, she said. A house that has been arranged. Clara gestured toward the chair. Please, she said, do sit down. Miss Marple did so, setting her knitting neatly in her lap. I hope you do not mind my calling, she said. I find that in matters such as these, it is often better to speak sooner rather than later. Clara considered her for a moment. No, she said. I think you're quite right. Miss Marple's eyes moved briefly to the notebook in Clara's hand. You have found something, she observed. Clara did not bother to deny it. Yes, she said. Miss Marple nodded gently. Yes, she said. I thought you might. Clara handed her the notebook. I am not entirely certain what to make of it, she said. Miss Marple opened it carefully, her expression thoughtful as she read. She did not hurry. At last she closed it. Yes, she said softly. Very interesting. Clara leaned forward slightly. You see something in it? Miss Marple smiled faintly. I see, she said, that your aunt was a woman who noticed things. Clara frowned. That much is clear. Yes, Miss Marple said. But more importantly, she noticed something she believed should not exist. Clara's gaze sharpened. What do you mean? Miss Marple rested her hands lightly on the notebook. These entries, she said, are not merely observations, they are reactions. To what? Miss Marple looked at her. To something unexpected, she said. Clara considered this. The hymn she mentions? Possibly, Miss Marple said. And the final entry, she must never know. Miss Marple's expression grew thoughtful. Yes, she said. That is the most interesting part. Why? Miss Marple smiled gently. Because, she said, it suggests that the secret was not only being kept, but protected. Clara felt a faint chill. Protected from whom? Miss Marple's gaze moved briefly toward the door, then back to Clara. That, she said softly, is precisely what we must discover. Clara hesitated. There is something else, she said. Miss Marple looked at her expectantly. A locked room, Clara said. Miss Marple's eyes lit with quiet interest. Yes, she said. So as I had rather hoped there might be. Clara could not help but smile slightly. You do not seem surprised. Miss Marple returned the smile. My dear, she said, there is almost always a locked room. Clara gestured toward the hallway. Then you may care to see it. Miss Marple rose slowly. Yes, she said. I think I should. They moved together toward the door at the end of the hallway. It stood as before, closed, silent, unyielding. Miss Marple regarded it thoughtfully. Yes, she said. Very interesting indeed. Clara folded her arms. You believe it contains the answer? Miss Marple shook her head gently. No, she said. Clara frowned. No? Miss Marple smiled. No, she repeated. I believe it contains the question. Clara looked at the door again, and for the first time, she understood. Whatever lay beyond it was not merely hidden. It had been kept. What lies behind a door? Miss Marple did not immediately attempt the handle. Instead, she stood before the locked door with the same quiet attentiveness she might have given to a person, observing, considering, allowing it, in a sense, to speak. Clara watched her with growing curiosity. You're not going to try it? She asked. Oh, no, Miss Marple said mildly. That would be premature. Clara raised an eyebrow. Premature? Yes, Miss Marple replied. One should never force a door, either literally or otherwise, before understanding why it was closed in the first place. Clara folded her arms, leaning slightly against the wall. And you believe you can determine that without opening it? Miss Marple smiled faintly. My dear, one can determine a great many things without opening doors. She paused. People, for instance, are very much like doors. Clara considered this, then gave a small, amused breath. I begin to see what Mr. Grant meant, she said. Miss Marple glanced at her. Oh? And what did Mr. Grant say? That you have a way of noticing things. Miss Marple inclined her head modestly. Yes, she said, I do try. She stepped a little closer to the door, examining the frame, the hinges, the lock itself. Quite well maintained, she murmured. Yes, Clara said. I noticed that too. It has been used recently. Indeed, Miss Marple said, which is very significant. Clara straightened. In what way? Miss Marple turned slightly toward her. Well, she said, if a room is truly meant to be sealed, forgotten as it were, it tends to gather signs of neglect. Dust in the hinges, stiffness in the handle, a general reluctance to cooperate. She gestured lightly toward the door. This one, however, appears quite accustomed to being opened. Clara's gaze sharpened. Then someone has been using it. Yes, Miss Marple said simply. A brief silence followed. Mr. Grant, Clara said quietly. Miss Marple did not respond immediately. Possibly, she said at last. Clara frowned. You sound unconvinced. Miss Marple smiled faintly. I am rarely convinced of anything too quickly, she said. It is a habit I recommend. Clara glanced again at the door. If he has the key, then why not say so? Ah, Miss Marple said, that is the interesting part. She turned away from the door, moving slowly back toward the sitting room. Tell me, she said, what impression have you formed of Mr. Grant? Clara followed her. He is helpful, she said, capable. Perhaps a little too careful, Miss Marple nodded. Yes, she said. Carefulness is often a sign of something unspoken. Clara sat down, her thoughts turning. You believe he knows more than he has said. Miss Marple settled into her chair. I believe, she said gently, that everyone here knows more than they have said. Clara gave a small, humourless laugh. That does seem to be the pattern. Yes, Miss Marple agreed. It usually is. She picked up her knitting, her needles moving with quiet precision. There is something else, she added. Clara looked at her. Yes, Miss Marple's tone remained light. The notebook, she said, particularly the final entry. She must never know, Clara said. Yes. Clara frowned. I have been thinking about that, she said. It suggests someone else, a woman, who was being deliberately kept in ignorance. Quite so, Miss Marple said. But why? Clara asked. What could be so important? Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. My dear, she said, people do not go to such lengths to protect trivial matters. Clara leaned forward slightly. You think it is something serious? Miss Marple glanced at her. I think, she said, it is something that has lasted a very long time. Clara was silent for a moment. A long time, she repeated. Yes. Her thoughts moved quickly now. A past incident, she said slowly. Something that was hidden or dismissed. Miss Marple nodded. Yes, she said. That would be my impression. Clara's gaze returned briefly to the hallway. And the locked room? Miss Marple followed her glance. Yes, she said softly. The physical expression of something kept separate, Clara exhaled slowly. This is beginning to feel less like a simple estate matter. Miss Marple smiled. My dear, she said, it never was. A knock at the door interrupted them. Clara looked up. Yes? The maid appeared again. Mr. Grant has returned, miss, she said, and he asks if you might see him. Clara and Miss Marple exchanged a brief glance. Of course, Clara said. Show him in. A moment later, Mr. Oliver Grant entered the room. He paused slightly upon seeing Miss Marple, though his expression quickly returned to its usual composure. Miss Marple, he said politely. Mr. Grant, she replied. There was a brief, almost imperceptible tension in the air. Clara noticed it at once. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said. Not at all, Clara replied. We were merely discussing the house, Mr. Grant nodded. Yes, he said, there is much to discuss. Clara studied him carefully. Yes, she said, there is. A pause. I have been looking through the study, she continued. There are certain inconsistencies. Mr. Grant's expression did not change. I imagine so, he said. And I have also examined the locked room, Clara added. This time there was a reaction, very slight, but unmistakable. I see, he said. Clara held his gaze. You mentioned that the key had not been found. Yes. And yet, she said calmly, the lock shows signs of recent use. The silence that followed was brief, but significant. Miss Marple did not look at him. She continued her knitting. Mr. Grant exhaled slowly. Yes, he said at last. That is true. Clara didn't move. Then you have opened it. Another pause. Yes, he said. The admission settled into the room. Clara's voice remained steady. Why did you not say so? Mr. Grant looked at her directly. Because, he said, it seemed unnecessary. Miss Marple's needles paused for just a moment, then resumed. Unnecessary, Clara repeated. Yes, Clara's expression sharpened. I think, she said, that you had better explain. Mr. Grant hesitated. For the first time since she had met him, his composure seemed to waver. Not dramatically, but enough to reveal something beneath it. Reluctance. It is not what you think, he said. Miss Marple looked up briefly. That is often the case, she said mildly. Mr. Grant glanced at her, then back to Clara. The room contains personal effects, he said. Nothing of particular significance. Clara did not believe him. That is not sufficient, she said. He hesitated again. I did not think it necessary to involve you in matters that concern my aunt, Clara interrupted. Mr. Grant fell silent. Miss Marple set her knitting aside. Mr. Grant, she said gently, it is always best to avoid partial explanations. They tend to invite further questions. He gave a small, strained breath. Yes, he said, I see that. Clara's voice was quiet now, but firm. I would like to see the room, she said. Mr. Grant looked at her. For a moment it seemed as though he might refuse. Then he nodded. Very well, he said. The three of them moved together toward the hallway. The door stood waiting. Mr. Grant reached into his pocket, and for the first time produced a key. Clara watched him closely. So, he had it all along. The key slid into the lock with quiet precision. There was a pause. Then, a soft, deliberate click. The door opened, and whatever had been kept hidden within Rose Cottage was about to be seen. The room that should not exist. The door opened slowly, not with the creak of disuse, but with the quiet compliance of something that had been opened many times before, just not in the presence of others. Clara stood very still. There is always a moment, she thought, just before a hidden thing is revealed, when the mind prepares itself for what it expects to see, and is almost always wrong. Mr. Oliver Grant stepped back slightly, allowing Clara and Miss Marple to enter first. Neither of them hurried. The room beyond was not what Clara had imagined. It was not neglected, nor was it particularly unusual. At first glance it appeared lived in. Clara crossed the threshold slowly, her gaze moving across the space. Here, a narrow bed stood against one wall neatly made. A small writing desk occupied the corner, its surface arranged with quiet care. A wardrobe stood closed, its dark wood polished. There were curtains at the window, light, patterned, and far softer than those in the rest of the house. This is not a storage room, Clara said quietly. No, Miss Marple agreed. Clara turned slowly. This is a bedroom. Mr. Grant said nothing. Miss Marple moved further inside, her eyes taking in every detail, not quickly but thoroughly. Yes, she said softly. A bedroom, and a very particular one. Clara frowned. What do you mean? Miss Marple touched the edge of the curtain lightly. These fabrics, she said, are not consistent with the rest of the house. Clara looked again. It was true. Elsewhere, Rose Cottage had been furnished with restraint. Practical, yet orderly, almost austere. But here, there was a softness, a warmth. This room was not arranged by Miss Whitcomb in the same way as the others, Clara said. Miss Marple smiled faintly. On the contrary, she said, I think it was arranged very deliberately by her. Clara's brow furrowed. For what purpose? Miss Marple did not answer immediately. Instead, she moved toward the desk. A small framed photograph stood there, face down. Miss Marple lifted it gently, turning it over. She studied it for a moment, then handed it to Clara. Clara looked. It was a photograph of a young woman, not particularly striking at first glance, but there was something in her expression, a quiet steadiness, a hint of uncertainty perhaps, but also resolve. Clara frowned. "I have never seen her before," she said. Miss Marple nodded. "No," she said. "I did not expect you would." Clara turned the photograph over. There was no inscription, no date, nothing to identify her. "Who is she?" Clara asked. Miss Marple glanced briefly toward Mr. Grant. He stood near the doorway, his expression unreadable. "That," Miss Marple said gently, "is precisely the question." Clara set the photograph down carefully. Her attention moved around the room again. "There are clothes," she said. She opened the wardrobe. Inside hung several dresses, simple but well made, not old, not forgotten, used. "These are not relics," Clara said quietly. "They are recent." "Yes," Miss Marple said. Clara turned sharply toward Mr. Grant. "You said this room contained nothing of significance." He did not answer immediately. "This room has been occupied," Clara said. "Yes," he said at last. The word fell heavily, and Clara stared at him. "By whom?" Another pause. "I do not know," he said. Miss Marple's eyes lifted slightly. Just for a moment. Clara did not believe him. "You have the key," she said. "You have opened this room. You expect me to believe that you do not know who lived here?" Mr. Grant's composure tightened. "I said I do not know," he repeated. Miss Marple spoke quietly. "Perhaps," she said, "it would be more accurate to say that you were never told." Mr. Grant looked at her and did not contradict her. Clara's breath caught slightly. "Then someone did live here," she said. "Yes," Miss Marple replied. Clara turned slowly back toward the room. "A hidden occupant," she murmured. Miss Marple inclined her head. "Yes," she said. "A most interesting arrangement." Clara moved toward the bed, her fingers brushing lightly against the coverlet. "It was maintained," she said, "but regularly." "Yes," Miss Marple said. Clara straightened. "My aunt lived alone," she said. "Everyone agrees on that." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Yes," she said, "they do." Clara's expression sharpened. "But that is not true." "No," Miss Marple said softly, "it is not." A silence followed. Clara's thoughts raced. "The notebook," she said suddenly. "The entries. She must never know." Miss Marple nodded. "Yes," she said. "That becomes clearer now, does it not?" Clara looked at her. "You believe the she refers to me?" Miss Marple considered. "Possibly," she said, "but more likely it refers to someone else entirely." Clara frowned. "Someone else?" Miss Marple's gaze moved slowly around the room. "Yes," she said. "Someone for whom this arrangement was intended." Clara shook her head slightly. "This makes no sense," Miss Marple smiled gently. "My dear," she said, "it makes perfect sense, once one understands the motive." Clara looked at her sharply. "And what motive could justify hiding a person in one's own house?" Miss Marple did not answer immediately. Instead, she stepped toward the desk again. There, beside the photograph, lay a small stack of folded papers. She picked them up carefully. Letters. Clara leaned closer. "Those were not in the study," she said. "No," Miss Marple replied, "they were not." She unfolded one. The handwriting was neat but not precise, more fluid than Miss Whitcomb's careful entries. Miss Marple read silently for a moment, then another. Clara watched her. "Well?" she asked. Miss Marple looked up. "Yes," she said softly. "That is quite illuminating." Clara's patience thinned. "What is it?" Miss Marple handed her the letter. Clara read. "I do not know how much longer this can continue. You say it is necessary, that it is for the best, but I cannot help feeling that I am living a life that is not entirely my own." Clara's breath caught. "You promised that one day it would be different, that I would not always have to remain hidden. But time passes, and nothing changes." Clara lowered the paper slowly. "This is—" she began, then stopped. Miss Marple watched her quietly. "Yes," she said. Clara looked up. "This is someone who is being kept here," she said. Miss Marple nodded. "Yes," she said. Quite deliberately. Clara's voice dropped. "Why?" Miss Marple's expression grew thoughtful. "That," she said, is the question that connects everything. Clara glanced again around the room. The bed, the clothes, the photograph, or the letters. A hidden life, within a house that claimed none. Her thoughts returned to the notebook, saw him again. Her eyes widened slightly. "Him," she said softly. Miss Marple looked at her. "Yes," she said. Clara's voice was almost a whisper now. "The person my aunt saw, the one she mentioned, he must be connected to this." Miss Marple inclined her head. "Yes," she said. "I believe he is." Clara turned slowly toward Mr. Grant. "You knew," she said. He didn't answer. "You may not have known everything," Clara continued, "but you knew enough." Mr. Grant's expression remained guarded. "I knew there was something unusual," he said. Clara's eyes narrowed. "That is not the same as ignorance." Miss Marple spoke gently. "Mr. Grant," she said, "it would be most helpful if you were to tell us exactly what you did know." He hesitated. "For longer this time. Then," he exhaled. "I knew," he said, "that Miss Whitcomb received visitors." Clara stiffened. "Visitors?" "Yes." Miss Marple's eyes sharpened slightly. "How often?" she asked. "Not regularly," he said, "but often enough." "And did you ever see them?" Miss Marple asked. He hesitated again. "Yes," he said. Clara's voice was steady now. "Who were they?" Mr. Grant looked at her, and for the first time there was no careful neutrality in his expression. "There was one," he said slowly. "A man." The room seemed to grow still. Miss Marple did not move. Clara's voice dropped. "The same one she wrote about?" Mr. Grant nodded. "Yes," he said. A silence followed, because now the shape of the mystery had changed. This was no longer simply about a hidden room or a secret occupant. It was about a connection between a hidden woman, a visiting man, and a past that had never been fully revealed. Miss Marple folded her hands lightly. Her voice, when she spoke, was very calm. "Yes," she said. "I think we are beginning to see it now." The pattern beneath the silence. For a time after Mr. Grant's admission, no one spoke. The room itself seemed to absorb the significance of it. The quiet bed, the folded dresses, the letters written in a hand that carried both restraint and longing. What had first appeared merely curious now felt deliberate in a far more troubling way. A hidden life, sustained not by accident, but by design. Clara stood near the desk, the letter still in her hand. "A man," she said again, as though testing the reality of it. "You saw him?" "Yes," Mr. Grant replied. His voice was steady, but not as certain as before. Miss Marple remained seated, her gaze thoughtful rather than urgent. "And how often did he visit?" she asked gently. Mr. Grant hesitated. "Not on any fixed schedule," he said. "But I became aware of it over time." Clara looked at him sharply. "Became aware?" she repeated. "You mean you did not question it?" "I had no reason to," he said quickly. "Miss Whitcomb was a private person. It was not my place to wonder why a man was visiting a woman who claimed to live alone," Clara interrupted. Mr. Grant faltered. "Yes," he said. "I wondered." Miss Marple inclined her head slightly. "But you did not ask," she said. "No." Miss Marple's expression softened. "No," she said quietly. "I imagine you did not." Clara exhaled, setting the letter down. "This is extraordinary," she said. "A hidden occupant, secret visits, missing correspondence, and no one thought to question any of it." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "My dear," she said, "people question things all the time." Clara frowned. "Then why does no one speak of it?" Miss Marple looked at her. "Because," she said gently, "they have already decided upon an explanation that allows them not to." The words settled into the room. Clara turned slowly, her thoughts shifting. "A story," she said. "They created a story." "Yes," Miss Marple said. Clara's gaze moved again across the room. A quiet woman, living alone, no disturbances. Miss Marple nodded. "A very comfortable arrangement," she said. Clara shook her head. "But it is not true." "No," Miss Marple replied. "It is not." A silence followed. Clara's eyes returned to the photograph. She said softly. "The woman who lived here. She was hidden." "Deliberately?" "Yes," Miss Marple said. "And the man who visited, he knew," Clara continued. Miss Marple did not answer immediately. "He must have," Clara said. Miss Marple inclined her head slightly. "Yes," she said. "He must have." Clara's expression tightened. "Then he is central to all of this." Miss Marple's eyes rested on her with quiet approval. "Yes," she said. "I believe he is." Mr. Grant shifted uneasily. "I do not see how," he said. "He came and went, that is all." Miss Marple looked at him. "My dear Mr. Grant," she said gently, "people rarely come and go without reason." He did not respond. Clara crossed the room slowly, her thoughts moving more quickly now. "The notebook," she said. "The entries. Saw him again." Miss Marple nodded. "Yes." "And it cannot remain hidden forever," Clara added. "Yes." Clara stopped. "That suggests tension," she said. "A situation becoming unstable." Miss Marple's expression grew thoughtful. "Very good," she said. Clara looked at her. "You believe something was about to change." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "I believe," she said, "that something had already begun to change." A pause. Clara's voice dropped. "And then my aunt died." Miss Marple inclined her head. "Yes." Clara turned sharply toward Mr. Grant. "When exactly did you find her?" He hesitated. "In the morning," he said. "As I told you." "Yes," Clara said. "But under what circumstances?" Mr. Grant's composure wavered again. "I came as usual," he said. There was no answer. "I let myself in." "With your key?" Clara interrupted. "Yes." "And then?" "I found her in her bed." Clara studied him closely. "And nothing seemed unusual?" He hesitated. Miss Marple's gaze sharpened slightly. "There was—" Mr. Grant began, then stopped. Clara stepped closer. "There was what?" He exhaled. "The room was disturbed." Clara's eyes widened. "Disturbed?" "Yes," he said. "Not violently, but not as it should have been." Miss Marple leaned forward slightly. "In what way?" she asked. Mr. Grant seemed reluctant. "There were papers," he said, "drawers left open, as though someone had been searching." Clara felt a chill. "And you said nothing of this." "I did not think it significant," he replied. Miss Marple's voice was very gentle. "On the contrary," she said, "it is most significant." Clara turned away, her thoughts racing. "Someone was here," she said, "before or after her death." "Yes," Miss Marple said. Clara's gaze moved back to the hidden bedroom. "And the person who lived here, what became of her?" No one answered, because none of them knew. Clara's voice dropped. "She is gone." Miss Marple nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "She's no longer here." A silence followed. Clara's thoughts began to take shape. A hidden woman disappears. A man who visited regularly is no longer seen. My aunt dies, and her study is disturbed. She looked at Miss Marple. "These are not separate events." Miss Marple's eyes held hers. "No," she said. "They are not." Mr. Grant spoke again, his voice uncertain now. "You are suggesting something criminal?" Miss Marple considered him for a moment. "I am suggesting," she said, "that we do not yet understand what has happened." Clara frowned. "But you suspect something?" Miss Marple smiled faintly. "My dear," she said, "I always suspect something." Clara gave a short breath. "Yes," she said, "I see that." She turned again to the desk, picking up the letter once more. "I cannot help feeling that I am living a life that is not entirely my own." Clara's expression softened slightly. "She was unhappy," she said. Miss Marple nodded. "Yes," she said, "but also resigned." Clara looked at her. "You think she accepted it?" Miss Marple's gaze was thoughtful. "I think," she said, "that she believed it was necessary." Clara's voice tightened. "Necessary for whom?" Miss Marple did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked slowly around the room, at the bed, the clothes, the photograph. Then she said, "For someone else." The words settled quietly. Clara's breath caught. "The she in the notebook," she said. Miss Marple nodded. "Yes." Clara's mind moved quickly. A secret kept to protect someone." "Yes," Miss Marple said. Clara turned back toward Mr. Grant. "Did my aunt ever receive letters?" she asked. He hesitated. "Yes," he said. "And where are they now?" Another pause. "I do not know," he said. Miss Marple's eyes rested on him. "You're quite certain of that?" she asked gently. He did not meet her gaze. "Yes," he said. Clara exhaled slowly. "They are missing," she said. Miss Marple inclined her head. "Yes," she said, quite deliberately. A silence followed. Clara looked again at the room, the hidden life, the careful arrangement, the absence of explanation, and suddenly she understood something. This was not just concealment, she said. Miss Marple looked at her. "No?" Clara shook her head slowly. "No," she said. Her voice dropped. "This was protection." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Yes," she said. "I believe it was." The name that was not spoken. The realization lingered in the room long after Clara spoke it. Protection. It changed everything. Not the facts themselves, but their meaning. What had seemed secretive now suggested intention. What had appeared deceptive now hinted at purpose. Miss Marple, who had been watching Clara closely, gave a small, approving nod. "Yes," she said softly. "That is the correct direction of thought." Clara stood very still. "If my aunt was protecting someone," she said slowly, "then the question becomes, why?" Mr. Grant shifted slightly. "There are many reasons one might wish to protect another," he said. Clara glanced at him. "Yes," she said, "but not usually by hiding them in a locked room for years." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "No," she said, "not usually." A pause. Clara's gaze moved once more around the hidden bedroom. "She lived here," she said. "Not briefly, but for some time." "Yes," Miss Marple agreed. Clara frowned. "But why here? Why not elsewhere? Why conceal her at all?" Miss Marple did not answer immediately. Instead, she rose and moved slowly toward the wardrobe again, her fingers brushing lightly along the fabric of one of the dresses. "These are not the clothes of someone in transit," she said. "They are the clothes of someone settled." Clara nodded. "Yes," she said. "That is precisely what makes it so strange." Miss Marple turned back to her. "Only if one assumes that the situation itself was temporary," she said gently. Clara's eyes widened slightly. "You think it was intended to last?" Miss Marple inclined her head. "Yes," she said, "at least at first." Clara considered this. "A long-term concealment," she murmured. "Yes," Miss Marple said. Clara shook her head. "That would require planning, resources, secrecy, and cooperation," Miss Marple added. Clara looked at her sharply. "Cooperation?" Miss Marple nodded. "Yes," she said. "One cannot maintain such an arrangement alone, not indefinitely." Clara's thoughts moved quickly. "Then someone else must have known," she said. Miss Marple's eyes rested on her. "Yes," she said. "I believe so." Clara turned slowly toward Mr. Grant. He stiffened almost imperceptibly. "You?" Clara asked. He shook his head. "No," he said quickly. "Not in that sense." Miss Marple spoke calmly. "Mr. Grant may have known of something," she said, "but not necessarily what it was." Clara frowned. "That seems a very fine distinction." Miss Marple smiled. "My dear," she said, "most important distinctions are—" A silence followed. Clara's attention returned to the desk, the photograph, the letters. She picked up the photograph again, studying it more closely this time. "There is something familiar about her," she said slowly. Miss Marple looked at her with interest. "Is there?" Clara hesitated. "I cannot place it," she said. "But there is something—" Miss Marple rose and came to stand beside her. "May I?" she asked. Clara handed her the photograph. Miss Marple studied it for a long moment. Not the features alone, but the expression, the posture, the quality of the gaze. "Yes," she said softly. Clara looked at her. "You see it too?" Miss Marple nodded. "Yes," she said. "Though perhaps not in the same way." Clara frowned. "What do you mean?" Miss Marple returned the photograph to her. "I see resemblance," she said. Clara's eyes sharpened. "To whom?" Miss Marple's gaze rested on her. Clara stared at her. "No," she said. Miss Marple said nothing. "That is not possible," Clara continued. "I would know." Miss Marple's expression remained gentle. "Would you?" she asked. Clara's grip tightened slightly on the photograph. A flicker of uncertainty passed through her. "My family," she began, then stopped. Miss Marple waited. Clara exhaled slowly. My mother never spoke much of her relatives, she said. There were disagreements, Miss Marple nodded. Yes, she said. That is often the case. Clara's voice dropped, but she would not have hidden something like this. Miss Marple did not contradict her. She merely said, People hide all sorts of things, my dear, even from those they love. The words settled heavily. Clara turned away, her thoughts unsettled now in a new way. No, she said quietly. There must be another explanation. Miss Marple did not press her. Instead, she moved back toward the desk and picked up the small stack of letters again. These may help us, she said. Clara turned back. Yes, she said. Read them. Miss Marple unfolded another letter. Her eyes moved carefully across the page. Then she read aloud. You say it is safer this way, but I do not understand from whom I am meant to be hidden. You tell me that it is necessary for her sake, but she does not even know I exist. Clara's breath caught. Sometimes I think you are protecting something else entirely. Not me, but the past. Miss Marple lowered the letter. Clara stared at her. The past, she repeated. Miss Marple nodded. Yes, she said. Clara's thoughts raced. My aunt was protecting the past, she said, not just the person. Miss Marple's eyes held hers. Exactly. Clara looked down at the photograph again. A hidden woman, she said slowly. A hidden past, and a secret that must never be known. Miss Marple inclined her head. Yes. Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. Then this is not just about who she was. Miss Marple's expression grew thoughtful. No, she said. Clara looked up. It is about what she represents. Miss Marple smiled faintly. Yes, she said. Very good. A pause. Clara turned sharply toward Mr. Grant. The man who visited, she said. What did he look like? Mr. Grant hesitated. Miss Marple watched him closely. He was... Mr. Grant began, then faltered. Clara stepped closer. You saw him, she said. You must remember. He nodded slowly. Yes, he said. And? Clara pressed. Mr. Grant's expression shifted. Not into fear, but into something else. Recognition. He was familiar, he said. Clara frowned. In what way? Mr. Grant hesitated. Miss Marple spoke softly. Perhaps, she said, you recognized him from somewhere. Mr. Grant looked at her, and then, very quietly, he said, Yes. The word seemed to echo. Clara's voice was steady now. From where? Mr. Grant took a breath. Then, he answered, From the village. A silence followed. Clara's eyes widened. The village? She repeated. Yes, he said. Miss Marple's gaze sharpened slightly. You're quite certain? She asked. Yes, he said. Clara's thoughts moved quickly. Then he is still here, she said. Mr. Grant did not answer, because he did not need to. Miss Marple folded her hands. Yes, she said softly. I believe he is. The realization settled over them. This was no distant mystery, no forgotten past. The secret of Rose Cottage was not hidden in time. It was still present, still breathing, and somewhere, in the quiet village of Witchwood Hollow, a man walked freely, who knew exactly what had been hidden, and why. The man in plain sight. The realization did not arrive with drama. It settled quietly, almost gently, like a truth that had been waiting patiently for recognition. The man was still in the village. Clara stood by the window, her fingers resting lightly against the glass as she looked out over the garden. The roses swayed faintly in the afternoon breeze, their soft movement in stark contrast to the tension gathering inside her thoughts. He has been here all along, she said. Miss Marple, seated comfortably with her knitting, indeed did not look surprised. Yes, she said. That is often the way of such things, Clara turned, and no one has said anything. Miss Marple smiled faintly. My dear, she said, people rarely speak of what they have decided not to see. Clara frowned. But why? She asked. If he is connected to all of this, if he knew about the woman, the hidden room, everything, then why remain silent? Miss Marple's needles moved gently. Because silence, she said, can be very convenient. Clara shook her head. This is more than convenience. Yes, Miss Marple agreed. It is. Mr. Grant, who had remained near the doorway, spoke hesitantly. "I did not realize," he began, then stopped. Clara looked at him. "You did not realize what?" He hesitated. "That it was this serious." Miss Marple glanced up briefly. "It is rarely wise," she said gently, "and to assume that something hidden is also harmless." Mr. Grant lowered his gaze. Clara turned back toward Miss Marple. "If he is in the village," she said, "then we must find him." Miss Marple's expression remained calm. "Yes," she said, "though not in the way you imagine." Clara frowned. "What do you mean?" Miss Marple set her knitting aside. "My dear," she said, "we do not need to find him." Clara stared at her. "We do not?" Miss Marple smiled. "No," she said, "because we already know him." The words fell quietly, but their effect was immediate. Clara's eyes widened. "You know who he is?" Miss Marple did not answer directly. Instead, she asked, "Tell me, Miss Hastings, when you walked through the village yesterday, did anyone strike you as particularly attentive?" Clara thought back. "Faces, voices, moments." "The woman at the post office," she said slowly. "Mrs. Delaney, she seemed guarded." Miss Marple nodded. "Yes," she said. "She knows something, but she is not our man," Clara continued. "There were others, people watching, but not speaking." "Yes," Miss Marple said. Clara's expression tightened. "And Mr. Grant," she added quietly. Mr. Grant looked up sharply. Miss Marple glanced at him, then back at Clara. "A reasonable suspicion," she said, "but not, I think, the correct one." Clara exhaled slowly. "Then who?" Miss Marple rose to her feet. Her movement was unhurried, but deliberate. "There is something," she said, "that has not yet been properly considered." Clara looked at her. "What is that?" Miss Marple's gaze moved toward the hidden bedroom. "The woman," she said. Clara frowned. "What about her?" Miss Marple stepped slowly into the doorway of the room. "We have been asking who she is," she said, "and why she was hidden." "Yes," Clara said. Miss Marple turned back to her. "But we have not yet asked," she continued, "what she believed." Clara hesitated. "What she believed?" Miss Marple nodded. "Yes," she said. "About herself, about her situation, about the man who visited her." Clara's thoughts shifted. "She trusted him," she said slowly. Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Yes," she said. "I think she did." Clara's expression grew thoughtful. "The letters. She questioned him, but she did not reject him." "Quite so," Miss Marple said. Clara looked at her sharply. "Then he had influence over her." Miss Marple inclined her head. "Yes," she said. "A great deal." A pause. Clara's voice dropped. "Then he is not merely involved," she said. Miss Marple's eyes held hers. "No," she said. "He is central." The realization deepened. Clara turned slowly toward Mr. Grant. "When did you last see him?" she asked. Mr. Grant hesitated. "Shortly before Miss Whitcomb died," he said. Clara's breath caught. "And after?" she asked. "No," he said. Miss Marple spoke quietly. "Did you notice anything unusual about him?" she asked. Mr. Grant frowned slightly. "He seemed unsettled," he said. Clara's gaze sharpened. "In what way?" Mr. Grant considered. "He was not as composed as before," he said. "There was a sense of urgency." Miss Marple nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. Clara's thoughts moved quickly. "Something had changed," she said. "Yes," Miss Marple replied. Clara looked toward the desk. "Ah, the notebook. It cannot remain hidden forever." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Exactly." Clara's voice tightened. "Then he knew the secret was at risk." Miss Marple inclined her head. "Yes." A silence followed. Clara turned back toward Miss Marple. "And now he is still here," she said, "in the village, acting as though nothing has happened." Miss Marple's expression was thoughtful. "Yes," she said, "which suggests something very important." Clara frowned. "What?" Miss Marple looked at her. "That he believes the secret is still safe." The words settled heavily. Clara's eyes widened. "But it is not," she said. Miss Marple smiled faintly. "No," she said. A pause. "And he does not yet know that," she added. Clara exhaled slowly. "Then we have an advantage." Miss Marple inclined her head. "Yes," she said. "A small one, but sufficient." Clara's voice was steady now. "What do we do?" Miss Marple picked up her gloves. "We wait," she said. Clara frowned. "Wait," Miss Marple smiled. "My dear," she said, "when a secret begins to unravel, those who depend upon it often reveal themselves." Clara considered this. "You expect him to act," she said. Miss Marple nodded. "Yes," she said, "soon." A silence followed. Outside, the light had begun to fade once more, the village settling into its quiet rhythms. But within Rose Cottage, the stillness had changed, because now the secret was no longer entirely hidden, and somewhere, in the quiet lanes of Witchwood Hollow, a man moved carefully, unaware that the truth was already closing in. When silence breaks. Miss Marple was quite correct. They did not have to wait long. It was early evening when the first sign came, not dramatic, not alarming, but subtle in a way that demanded attention. Clara noticed it first. The study window, which she distinctly remembered closing before dusk, now stood slightly ajar. She paused in the doorway, her breath catching just enough to sharpen her senses. "Miss Marple," she said quietly. Miss Marple, seated by the fire, looked up at once. "Yes?" "The window," Clara said. Miss Marple rose immediately, her expression composed but attentive. "Ah," she said softly. "That is interesting." Clara stepped into the room. "I closed it," she said. "I am quite certain of it." Miss Marple moved closer, examining the latch. "Yes," she said. "I believe you did." Clara turned slowly. "Then someone has been here." Miss Marple did not contradict her. "No," she said. "Ah, someone has returned." The distinction was subtle, but significant. Clara felt it at once. "Returned," she repeated. Miss Marple nodded. "Yes," she said, which suggests familiarity. Clara's pulse quickened. "The man?" Miss Marple's gaze remained steady. "Yes," she said. Clara moved toward the desk. The papers she had arranged earlier were no longer precisely aligned. A slight shift, barely noticeable, unless one had been paying close attention, which Clara had. "He was searching," she said. Miss Marple inclined her head. "Yes," she said. "For something he believes is still here." Clara's voice dropped. "The letters." "Possibly," Miss Marple replied. "Or something even more important." Clara turned sharply. What could be more important than this? Miss Marple's expression was thoughtful. "Proof," she said. The word hung quietly. Clara's breath slowed. "Proof of what?" Miss Marple looked at her. "Of whatever it is he fears might be discovered." A pause. Clara's thoughts moved quickly. "The past," she said. Miss Marple nodded. "Yes." At that moment a faint sound echoed from the hallway, a floorboard. Clara stiffened. Miss Marple did not move, but her eyes sharpened slightly. "He's still here," Clara whispered. Miss Marple's voice was calm. "Yes," she said. Another sound. Closer now. Clara glanced toward the door. "We should—" "No," Miss Marple said quietly. Clara stopped. Miss Marple's gaze remained fixed. "Let him come," she said. The footsteps approached. Slow. Careful. Then a shadow passed across the doorway, and a man stepped into the room. For a moment no one spoke. He stood just inside the threshold, his expression composed, but not entirely controlled. There was tension in it now, awareness. Clara studied him closely, and in that instant, she understood. "I have seen you before," she said. The man did not deny it. "Yes," he said quietly. Miss Marple regarded him calmly. "I thought you might come," she said. He gave a faint, humorless smile. "Yes," he said. "I imagine you did." Clara's voice was steady. "You were here earlier," she said. "Yes." "And you have been here before that," she continued. "Yes." The simplicity of his answers only deepened the tension. Miss Marple stepped slightly forward. "I think," she said gently, "that it would be best if we dispensed with uncertainty." The man's gaze moved to her. "Yes," he said. "I think so too." Clara's voice sharpened. "You knew about the room," she said. "Yes." "And the woman who lived here?" A pause. Then, "Yes." Clara felt a chill. "Who was she?" The man did not answer immediately. Miss Marple watched him closely. At last he said, "She was not meant to be known." The words echoed softly. Clara stepped closer. "That is not an answer." "No," he said, "it is not." Miss Marple spoke quietly. "But it is a beginning." The man looked at her. "You understand it," he said. Miss Marple inclined her head. "Yes," she said. "I believe I do." Clara turned sharply. "Then explain it," she said. Miss Marple did not look at her. Not yet. Instead, she said to the man, "You came back tonight because you realized something had changed." He did not deny it. "Yes," he said. "The study," Miss Marple continued, "the disturbance. You feared something had been discovered." "Yes." "And you wished to remove it." "Yes." Clara's voice tightened. "What?" The man's gaze shifted briefly toward the desk. Miss Marple followed it. "Ah," she said softly. Clara's breath caught. "The letters," she said. The man said nothing. Miss Marple looked at him. "You have already taken some, I think," she said. A pause. Then, "Yes," he said. Clara felt the realization settle. "You have been coming here," she said, "since her death." "Yes." Miss Marple nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "That explains a great deal." Clara's voice dropped. "You were afraid." The man's expression shifted slightly. "Yes," he said. Miss Marple's tone remained gentle. "Afraid of what might be found." He looked at her. "Yes." A silence followed. Clara's thoughts sharpened. "You're not just involved," she said. The man met her gaze. "No," he said. Clara's voice was almost a whisper now. "You are responsible." The word hung in the air. The man did not speak. Miss Marple stepped forward. "No," she said quietly. Clara turned to her. "No," she repeated. Miss Marple's expression was calm. "No," she said again. A pause. Then she added, "Not in the way you mean." The man's eyes remained on her. "You see it," he said. Miss Marple inclined her head. "Yes," she said. "I do." Clara looked between them. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. Miss Marple turned to her at last. "My dear," she said gently, "we are very close now." Clara's voice tightened. "Then say it." Miss Marple's gaze was steady. "Yes," she said, "I think it is time." The truth in plain sight. For a moment after Clara's demand, the room seemed to hold its breath. Miss Marple did not rush. She never did. Instead, she folded her hands lightly before her, as though arranging her thoughts into their proper order before giving them voice. "You are quite right," she said gently. "It is time." Clara stood rigid, her eyes moving between Miss Marple and the man who had entered the cottage so quietly, and yet now seemed to occupy the centre of everything. "Then please," Clara said, "no more fragments." Miss Marple inclined her head. "No," she said, "no more fragments." She turned slightly toward the man. "You have been very careful," she said. "Careful in your visits, careful in your silence, careful even now." He gave a faint, tired smile. "Yes," he said. "I had to be." Miss Marple nodded. "Yes," she said. "You believed you were protecting something." His expression shifted. "Yes." Clara stepped forward. "Protecting what?" she asked sharply. Miss Marple looked at her. "Not what," she said. A pause. "But whom?" Clara frowned. Miss Marple turned back toward the hidden bedroom. "The woman who lived here," she said. "The one we have been discussing." Clara's breath caught slightly. Miss Marple continued. "She was not merely hidden for convenience, nor even for safety in the ordinary sense." Clara's voice dropped. "Then why?" Miss Marple's gaze returned to her. "Because," she said, "her very existence presented a difficulty." The words settled heavily. Clara stared at her. "A difficulty?" Miss Marple nodded. "Yes," she said, "a difficulty rooted in the past." Clara's thoughts moved quickly. "The past," she repeated. Miss Marple inclined her head. "Yes." She turned slightly, addressing them both now. "Many years ago," she said, "something occurred, something that was never properly acknowledged." The man's gaze lowered. Miss Marple continued. "It was easier at the time to allow a certain version of events to stand." Clara's expression sharpened. "A story," she said. Yes, Miss Marple replied. A very convenient one. A pause. And like all such stories, she went on, it required maintenance. Clara felt a chill. Miss Marple's voice remained soft. The woman in this room, she said, was part of that original truth. Clara stared at her. You mean, she began, then stopped. Miss Marple nodded gently. Yes, she said. She should not have existed. At least, not according to the story that was told. The realization struck slowly. Clara's eyes widened. She was hidden, she said. Yes. Because her existence contradicted something. Yes. Clara turned sharply toward the man. You knew, she said. He did not deny it. Yes, he said. Miss Marple continued. You visited her, she said, not as a stranger, but as someone with a connection. The man's expression tightened slightly. Yes. Clara's voice trembled. Not with fear, but with the force of understanding. What kind of connection? A pause. Miss Marple looked at the man. This, she said gently, is the part you must say yourself. The silence that followed was not long, but it felt so. At last the man spoke. She was my daughter, he said. The words fell quietly. Clara stared at him. Your daughter? Yes. The room seemed to shift. Miss Marple inclined her head slightly. Yes, she said. That is correct. Clara's thoughts struggled to realign. But then, why hide her? She demanded. The man exhaled slowly. Because, he said, she was not supposed to exist. Clara shook her head. That is not an explanation. No, he said. It is not. Miss Marple spoke gently. It is, however, she said, a truth. Clara looked at her. Miss Marple's voice remained calm. Years ago, she said, there was an incident, a relationship perhaps, one that could not be acknowledged without consequences. Clara's gaze sharpened. A scandal, she said. Miss Marple nodded. Yes, she said. Of a sort. The man spoke again, his voice quieter now. It would have destroyed everything, he said. Reputations, families, lives. Clara's voice hardened. And so you hid her. Yes, Miss Marple added softly. And Miss Whitcomb assisted in that concealment. Clara turned. My aunt? Yes. Clara's breath caught. She protected her, she said. Miss Marple nodded. Yes, she said. For many years. Clara's thoughts raced. And the letters, she said. The frustration, the sense of being trapped. Yes, Miss Marple said. Clara looked at the man. You promised her something, she said. He did not answer immediately. Then, yes, he said. Clara's voice dropped. But you did not keep that promise. The silence confirmed it. Miss Marple spoke gently. And that, she said, is where the situation began to change. Clara turned to her. The notebook, she said. My aunt wrote that it could not remain hidden. Yes, Miss Marple replied. Clara's eyes widened. She was going to tell someone. Miss Marple inclined her head. Yes. Clara's gaze sharpened further. She must never know, she whispered. Miss Marple looked at her. Yes, she said. Clara's breath slowed. The she, Miss Marple's eyes held hers, was you. The words landed with quiet certainty. Clara stood completely still. No, she said. Miss Marple's expression did not change. Yes, she said gently. Clara shook her head. That makes no sense. Miss Marple's voice softened. My dear, she said, it makes perfect sense. Clara's thoughts raced. My aunt, hiding a child, protecting her. From me? Miss Marple nodded. Yes. Clara's voice dropped to almost nothing. Why? Miss Marple looked at her. Because, she said quietly, you were part of the story that made the truth impossible. The room fell silent, and for the first time, Clara felt the full weight of it. Not just a hidden woman, not just a secret past, but something far closer. Something that had always been there, unseen, and now impossible to ignore. What was meant to be hidden? For a long time after Miss Marple spoke, Clara did not move. The words had not shocked her in the ordinary sense. They had shifted something, quietly but irrevocably. As though a pattern she had never consciously seen had suddenly arranged itself into meaning. "You are part of the story that made the truth impossible." She repeated it inwardly, not resisting it now, but testing it. Miss Marple did not press her. She had long ago learned that the most important realizations cannot be hurried. They must arrive fully formed, or not at all. Clara's voice, when it came, was steady, but softer than before. "My mother," she said. Miss Marple inclined her head. "Yes." Clara's eyes were distant now, focused not on the room, but on memory. "She never spoke of her past," she said slowly, "not in detail. There were absences, things left unsaid." Miss Marple's voice was gentle. "Yes," she said. And those silences were not accidental." Clara turned toward the man. "And you," she said, "you were part of that past." He met her gaze. "Yes." There was no evasion now, no careful neutrality, only the quiet weight of truth. Clara exhaled slowly. "You had a relationship with my mother?" "Yes." The simplicity of the answer made it more difficult, not less. "And this woman," Clara said, her voice tightening slightly, "the one who lived here?" She glanced toward the hidden bedroom. "Was the result of that relationship?" "Yes." Clara closed her eyes briefly. It was not anger she felt, not immediately. It was something more complex, a sense of rearrangement, of understanding something that had always been incomplete. "My mother left," she said quietly. Miss Marple nodded. "Yes," she said. "That is the part of the story that was made acceptable." Clara opened her eyes. "And the rest," she said, "was hidden." "Yes." Miss Marple's voice remained calm. "Your aunt," she said, "took it upon herself to ensure that the child was cared for, without disturbing the life that had been constructed afterward." Clara looked at her. "So she raised her," she said. "Yes." Clara's gaze moved slowly around the room again. The bed, the clothes, the photograph, a life, contained. "And no one knew," she said. Miss Marple inclined her head. "No one who might have been affected by the knowledge," she said. Clara gave a faint, almost bitter smile. "That is a very careful distinction." Miss Marple returned it gently. "Yes," she said. "It had to be." A pause. Clara turned back to the man. "You visited her," she said. "Yes." "You were part of her life." "Yes." Clara's voice grew quieter, but not openly. "No." A silence followed. "And she wanted more," Clara said. The man did not answer, but he did not need to. Miss Marple spoke softly. "Yes," she said. "She did." Clara picked up one of the letters again, her eyes moving over the words. "I do not understand from whom I am meant to be hidden." "She did not even know why," Clara said. Miss Marple shook her head slightly. "No," she said. "She was told it was necessary, but not why." Clara looked up. "That is not protection," she said. Miss Marple's expression grew thoughtful. "No," she said. "Not entirely." Clara's voice sharpened just a fraction. "It is control." The word hung in the air. The man shifted slightly. "Yes," he said quietly. Miss Marple watched him. "And that," she said. "Is what changed." Clara turned to her. "My aunt," she said. She began to question it. "Yes." Clara's thoughts moved quickly now. She wrote that it could not remain hidden. That suggests she intended to act. Miss Marple nodded. "Yes," she said. "I believe she did." Clara's voice dropped. "And then she died." A silence followed. Clara looked sharply at the man. "You were here," she said. "Shortly before?" "Yes." Clara's eyes narrowed. "And afterward, you returned to remove the letters." "Yes," Miss Marple spoke gently. "Because you feared what they might reveal?" He nodded. "Yes." Clara's voice was steady. "But you did not kill her." Miss Marple answered this time. "No," she said. Clara looked at her. "You're certain?" Miss Marple inclined her head. "Yes," she said. "Quite certain." A pause. Clara exhaled slowly. "Then how did she die?" Miss Marple's expression was calm. "As was originally stated," she said. "Naturally." Clara stared at her. "After all of this," she said. "After everything." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "My dear," she said, "life does not always arrange itself according to narrative convenience." Clara let out a quiet breath. "No," she said. "I suppose it does not." A silence settled. But it was no longer the same silence as before. It was no longer protective. It was simply empty. Clara looked once more toward the hidden room. "She's gone," she said. Miss Marple nodded. "Yes," she said. Clara's voice softened. "Do you think she knew?" she asked. "Before she left?" Miss Marple considered this. "I think," she said gently, "that she understood enough to know that she deserved more than she had been given." Clara closed her eyes briefly. "Yes," she said, "that seems likely." The man spoke then, his voice quieter than it had been before. "I meant to tell her," he said. Clara opened her eyes. "When?" she asked. He did not answer. Miss Marple spoke softly. "Yes," she said. "That is often the difficulty." A pause. Clara looked at him steadily. "You were protecting your life," she said. He did not deny it. "Yes," Clara nodded slowly. "And my aunt," she said, "was protecting her." Miss Marple inclined her head. "Yes." Clara's gaze moved between them. "And in the end," she said, "neither of you truly succeeded." No one argued, because it was true. Miss Marple rose gently, her expression composed. "I think," she said, that everything essential has now been said." Clara nodded. "Yes," she said. "There was nothing more to uncover, only what remained to be accepted." The man turned slightly as though preparing to leave. Clara did not stop him. "Will you tell the truth now?" she asked. He paused. "Yes," he said. Clara studied him for a moment longer. Then she nodded. "Good," she said. He left quietly. The house felt different now. Not lighter, but clearer. Miss Marple moved toward the door, pausing only briefly. "My dear," she said gently, "you have shown a great deal of clarity." Clara gave a faint, tired smile. "I am not sure it feels like that." Miss Marple returned the smile. "It rarely does," she said. She stepped out into the evening. Clara remained where she was for a moment longer. Then, slowly, she walked into the hidden room. She stood there quietly, looking at the life that had been kept apart. Not erased, not forgotten, but hidden. "Yes," she said softly, "I understand now." In Witchwood Hollow, the story of Rose Cottage did not become a scandal. There were no dramatic revelations, no public reckonings, only a quiet shift in what was known and what was no longer denied. The house itself remained unchanged, its garden still blooming, its walls still carefully tended. But its silence had altered. It no longer concealed. It simply remembered. Miss Marple, returning to her own small routines, reflected, as she often did, that human nature was rarely as mysterious as people imagined. It was instead shaped by simple things: fear, love, pride, and the choices made to protect one at the expense of another. At Rose Cottage, those choices had lingered for years, unspoken, but not undone, and in the end the truth had not destroyed anything. It had merely revealed what had always been there, quietly waiting to be seen.